And welcome to another IGTV episode. I am Leah Courtney. I'm a homeschooling mom of 4 and a blogger at aswewalkalongtheroad.com. And this episode is the 6th in a series called Homeschooling the First Year and Beyond. If you are a new homeschooling mom, or you're thinking about homeschooling, or maybe you're just a few years into the homeschooling journey, then go ahead and scroll down in my profile and find the links to the first 5 videos in this series. Because in this series, I'm going over some of the things that new homeschooling moms think about, some of the concerns that they have. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about choosing your homeschooling method. But there's no way that I could really go in depth in very many homeschooling methods in the short amount of time for this episode. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to give you an overview of different homeschooling methods that are pretty common. And then I'm going to give you a few tips for things to think about as you're choosing your homeschooling method. And then over the next few episodes, I'm going to go into a little more detail about some of these different methods. I also have linked at the link in my Instagram bio a whole series of posts that I did on the blog that cover these different homeschooling methods that I'm going to be talking about. So there are lots of ways that you can choose to homeschool, and there are probably as many ways as there are homeschooling families, because one of the cool things about homeschooling is that we can adapt to what fits us. But there are some common methods that you're going to hear referred to as you start to dig into how people homeschool. The first of these that I'm going to talk about is the Charlotte Mason method. And Charlotte Mason homeschoolers, they use lots of great literature. Learning is sort of based on real living books. And this comes from the principles of education studied by Charlotte Mason, who was a British educator in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Another method that you might hear talked about is the classical method. Classical homeschoolers really focus on what's called the trivium and the idea that children develop into different stages and that the education process should change as they develop. So younger students start out with lots of memorization, and then they start learning how those things they memorize connect, and then in the last stage they start really applying what they learn. Another approach that you may hear talked about is a unit study approach. And a unit study is when there's one main topic and then all of the academic subjects revolve around that topic. So for instance, if your unit study was about ancient Egypt, then in history you might be reading about some of the Egyptian dynasties. In science, you might be studying the process of mummification. In literature, you might be reading some historical fiction set during the period of ancient Egypt. In math, you might be studying pyramids as geometry. So all of that learning revolves around the one main subject. You may also hear people talk about a traditional or textbook style approach. And that is when homeschoolers will use what is sometimes called a boxed curriculum, but it's more of a traditional school curriculum. And so it will have textbooks and workbooks. Students will work based on their grade level, and there will be a lot of just traditional style learning going on. Some homeschoolers also consider themselves eclectic. That's what I consider myself to be, an eclectic homeschooler. And basically that means we use a little bit of a bunch of different stuff to sort of put together what works for our family. So I would say I use a good bit of Charlotte Mason, but not always. I do occasionally use some textbooks and workbooks, but not with much of a focus on that kind of material. So I definitely am eclectic. I'm sort of picking and choosing unit studies. We do use unit studies as well. So I just kind of pick what works for us. And then you might also hear the word unschooling, and I'm not sure whether I would consider that a method, but it is a style of homeschooling that some people choose. Unschooling doesn't mean your kids aren't learning. What it means is you don't have a formal curriculum and that your kids aren't sitting down from, say, 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. doing schoolwork at a designated school time. Instead, it means that your kids are learning through activities and experiences that they have. And this kind of ranges from people who are like totally unschooled to people who might use some curriculum, but they are more focused on finding these events and situations where kids can learn directly from what they're doing. So that's kind of just a very brief overview. Like I say, we're going to dive into some more of those as we get into the next few episodes. But I wanted to end this second part of this episode by giving you some tips for choosing your homeschooling method. So first, I would consider how you learn and how your students learn, because you're going to be able to help them better if you're using a style that you are good with. So if you are good with something that is more structured, that's going to say to you, okay, do this, then do this, then do this, your homeschool curriculum should have that to help you do that. Look at the way your kids are learning. Are they very auditory, like they can learn a lot from what they hear? Then maybe choose some curriculum that's going to have auditory parts to it. Are they very visual? Then you might need something that's got lots of graphs and charts and timelines to help them sort of visualize information. Are they really hands-on? They need to get up and move. Maybe doing a unit study approach where you have some active hands-on participation is going to be good for them. So consider how you learn and teach and how your kids learn, and do what fits there. Another big consideration is to consider the budget that you're working with. There have been some awesome homeschooling curriculums that I've seen over the years and that I really, really, really wanted. But when I look at their price tag, I know that that's just not going to work for us because I can't afford to get that. So consider what your budget is before you start looking, because it doesn't matter if you find something you think is perfect if you're not going to be able to buy groceries for the next 2 months because you bought this homeschooling curriculum. Another thing that I would tell you to keep in mind is your family's structure and dynamics. Is your family a structured sort of, we like schedules, we do well with set schedules, we get up at the same time, we eat lunch at the same time? If so, you might want a more scheduled curriculum, something that's a little bit more structured. If your family isn't that, if you're more laid back and the kids like to sleep late and not get up at a certain time, and you're just a little bit more relaxed about it, then your curriculum can probably be a little bit more relaxed too and might work better for your family. So those are the things that I would tell you to consider as you are choosing your homeschooling method. But the most important one that I have saved till last is this. You need to choose the homeschooling method that works for your family, not just what you heard your friends say was the most wonderful, excellent, and best homeschooling method ever. Because if it doesn't work for your family, it doesn't work for your family. It doesn't matter how good it is for somebody else. For example, I had a good friend when my kids were younger, and they were classical homeschoolers, definitely. And I could tell that it worked for them. But when I tried to bring in some of those elements, my kids, just wasn't really working for us. Latin was a big one. I really wanted to do Latin because, I don't know, my friend was doing it, it was working for them, and it just sounded cool to say we were learning Latin. But it just didn't work for my kids and my family. So that's what you've got to keep in mind. What homeschooling method works for you? So in the next episode, I'm going to dive into some more of these homeschooling methods a little deeper, and we're going to go through some of those over the next few episodes. So thank you for watching, and remember to go back and watch the previous episodes. Thanks.